My brother told my boyfriend cheating on me was fine. I was shocked and disgusted. I, 23F, recently had a major fallout with my brother, 29M, after discovering something awful he said about me. He actually told my boyfriend, 24M, that cheating on me was fine, as long as he came back and loved me. When I found out, I was completely shocked and disgusted. Before starting, I need your support. Smash that like button and hit subscribe. It's totally free. I never thought I would have to choose between my family and my self-respect. My older brother has always been the kind of person who speaks without thinking, but I never imagined he would say something so awful about me. I always thought that no matter how much he teased me deep down, he cared. But I was wrong. That night, I had taken my parents home early after a family dinner, leaving my fiancé and my brother to enjoy a few drinks together. It seemed harmless at the time. My fiancé and I have always been open with each other, so I didn't think twice about letting him stay back for a while. But when he came home later that night, I could tell something was wrong. He hesitated before speaking, looking at me like he was unsure if he should tell me the truth. I asked him what was going on, and after a deep breath, he told me everything. My brother had told him that cheating wasn't a big deal, that as long as my fiancé came back and still acted like he loved me, it wouldn't matter if he had been with other women. I felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared. My own brother, the person who was supposed to care about me, was telling the man I planned to marry that it was okay to betray me. At first, I thought there had to be a mistake. Maybe he was joking. Maybe my fiancé had misunderstood. But then my fiancé told me the rest. My brother had also called me lazy because I was between jobs, saying I should be in the gym instead of sitting around. He had said it with the same smug tone he always used when talking down to me, the same way he had spoken to me my entire life, making me feel like I was never enough. I felt sick to my stomach. My whole life, I had accepted his teasing, his rude comments, and his constant need to act like he was better than me. I had always told myself it was just how older brothers were, but this was different. This wasn't just teasing. This was cruel. I sat there trying to process it all, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. It wasn't just what he had said, it was that he genuinely believed it. He thought I didn't deserve loyalty. He thought I wasn't worth respect. And worst of all, he thought he could say these things without consequences. I called my parents the next morning, expecting them to be as shocked as I was. I thought they would understand why I was hurt. But instead of being angry at him, they were mad at my fiancé for telling me. My mother sighed and said I was overreacting. My father told me I shouldn't hold a grudge over a silly comment. They acted as if I was the one causing problems, as if I was making a big deal out of nothing. That was when I realized something that hurt even more than my brother's words. My parents weren't just ignoring what he had done. They were protecting him. They were willing to let him say whatever he wanted as long as it didn't disrupt the peace. And if it did, then I was the problem, not him. I hung up the phone feeling completely alone. The people who were supposed to be in my corner had turned their backs on me. I looked at my fiancé, who had been silent the whole time, letting me process everything at my own pace. I could see the guilt in his eyes, as if he regretted telling me because of how much it had hurt me, but I was grateful. At least he had been honest. At least he had cared enough to tell me the truth. I sat with my thoughts for hours, replaying every conversation I had ever had with my brother. The times he had made fun of my career choices, the times he had laughed at me for struggling, the way he had always treated me like I was beneath him. And I asked myself, if he wasn't my brother, would I have ever let someone talk to me like this? Would I ever tolerate this kind of disrespect from anyone else? The answer was no. Something inside me shifted that day. I knew I couldn't keep pretending that his words didn't hurt me. I couldn't keep allowing my family to push me into silence for the sake of keeping things comfortable. If they wanted to protect him, fine. But I wasn't going to protect him from the consequences of his own words. And if that meant cutting him off, then so be it. My brother has always had strong opinions, most of which he shares without considering how they might affect others. He acts like he knows everything, as if his way of thinking is the only one that matters. That night, while drinking with my fiancé, he decided to give him some unsolicited advice that made my stomach turn when I heard about it. He told my fiancé that relationships aren't about loyalty, that as long as a man comes home and pretends to love his partner, he can do whatever he wants. He made it sound normal, as if cheating was just part of life. When my fiancé told me this, I couldn't believe it. How could my own brother say something so heartless? But that wasn't the only thing he said. He also took the opportunity to tear me down, calling me unmotivated and making it seem like I wasn't good enough. He told my fiancé that I should be doing more with my time, as if I wasn't already struggling enough. It wasn't just an insult, it was a direct attack on my worth. What hurt the most was that my brother wasn't just talking behind my back. He was planting seeds of doubt in my fiancé's mind, trying to make him see me as less than I was. It was as if he wanted to convince him that I wasn't someone worth respecting. My fiancé, to his credit, didn't take my brother's words seriously. He didn't agree with anything he said, but that didn't change the fact that my brother had tried to create a rift between us. He had taken the one person I trusted the most and tried to make him question me. That kind of betrayal is hard to forget. I spent hours thinking about why he would say such things. Was it jealousy? Did he feel the need to control every situation, even my relationship? Or did he genuinely believe that women shouldn't expect loyalty? No matter the reason, it didn't make his words any less painful. The worst part was knowing that he would never admit to it. If I confronted him, he would laugh it off or say I was being dramatic. He would act like it was all just a harmless conversation, like I had no right to be upset. That was the kind of person he was. Someone who hurt others without a second thought and then acted like it wasn't a big deal. I realized then that this wasn't just about one conversation. It was about a pattern of behavior. He had always dismissed my feelings, always made me feel like my opinions didn't matter. And now, he had gone even further by trying to sabotage the most important relationship in my life. That night, I lay awake replaying everything in my head. I thought about all the times I had let his words slide, all the moments where I had chosen to ignore his arrogance for the sake of keeping peace. But this time, I couldn't just let it go. This time, he had crossed a line that I couldn't forgive. I knew confronting my family would not be easy, but I couldn't ignore what had happened. I had spent too long excusing my brother's behavior, letting things slide for the sake of peace. This time, I needed to stand up for myself. I needed them to understand that what he said wasn't just careless talk, it was a betrayal. When I finally brought it up, I expected at least some understanding, maybe even a bit of disappointment in him. Instead, I was met with sighs and dismissive looks. My parents barely reacted, as if I was making a big deal out of nothing. They acted like I was creating drama over a meaningless conversation. "Your brother didn't mean it like that," my mother said, shaking her head. "He was just joking. You always take things too seriously." Joking? That was their excuse for everything he did. Anytime he said something cruel, anytime he put me down, it was brushed off as a joke, as if my feelings didn't matter, as if I was the problem for not laughing along. But this wasn't something I could just shrug off. I turned to my father, hoping for at least a little support, but he barely looked up. "You know how he is," he muttered. "There's no need to drag this out." No need? I was supposed to just pretend it never happened? Act like my own brother hadn't disrespected me in the worst way possible? What stung even more was that they weren't upset with him. They were upset with me. In their eyes, I was making things uncomfortable by refusing to let it go. It didn't matter that my brother had been wrong. It didn't matter that I had every right to be angry. All they cared about was keeping the family together, even if it meant ignoring the truth. I sat there, waiting for someone to tell me that what he said was unacceptable, that I had every right to be upset, but that moment never came. Instead, my mother's voice softened, like she was trying to reason with a child. "You know your brother loves you," she said. "Don't let this ruin your relationship." Love? If this was love, I wanted no part of it. Love didn't look like constant disrespect. Love didn't mean tearing someone down and expecting them to stay silent. If my brother truly cared about me, he would never have said those things in the first place. The conversation went in circles, each word making it clear that nothing would change. My parents had already made up their minds. They weren't going to hold him accountable. They weren't going to defend me. They just wanted everything to go back to normal. But how could I ever look at my brother the same way? How could I sit at the same table, smile, and pretend that I wasn't deeply hurt by what he had done? I had always believed that family should stand by each other, but I was beginning to realize that loyalty should go both ways. If they weren't willing to support me, why should I keep sacrificing my own self-respect just to keep them happy? For the first time in my life, I saw things clearly. I didn't have to put up with this just because we were related. I didn't owe my brother forgiveness, and I didn't owe my parents my silence. If they wanted me to pretend that nothing had happened, they were asking for something I could never give them. I walked away from that conversation feeling more alone than ever, but I also felt something else, a quiet sense of freedom. I had spent years trying to earn my brother's respect, waiting for my parents to finally take my side. But I wasn't waiting anymore. If they wanted me to choose between my dignity and my family, then the choice was already made. The days after that conversation felt empty. I kept waiting for a message, a call, some sign that my parents understood how much this had hurt me, but nothing came. The silence from my family was louder than any argument we could have had. Whenever I visited home before, my presence had felt normal, like I belonged there. Now it felt like I was an outsider. My parents didn't say much, but their expressions said everything. There was a coldness in the way they looked at me, a quiet disappointment that made it clear I was the one causing problems. My mother barely spoke beyond polite greetings, and my father stayed buried in his usual routines, pretending nothing had changed. My brother, on the other hand, acted like everything was fine. He went on with his life as if none of this had happened, making jokes, laughing, carrying conversations like nothing was wrong. The way he ignored the entire situation made my blood boil. He didn't even have the decency to acknowledge that he had done anything hurtful. I felt trapped in my own emotions. I wanted to stand my ground, but I also wanted things to go back to how they used to be. It was hard to accept that my family would rather pretend this wasn't an issue than acknowledge how deeply it affected me. I had always known they made excuses for my brother, but I had never realized how far they would go to protect him. The worst part was that I had no one to talk to about it. My fiancé was supportive, but he wasn't part of my family. He couldn't feel the weight of what I was losing. My friends listened, but they couldn't fully understand why it hurt so much. I felt like I was standing in the middle of two worlds, one where I had to fight for my self-respect, and another where I was expected to swallow my pride and accept things as they were. Each visit home felt heavier than the last. I could see the discomfort in the way my parents acted around me. It was clear that they wanted me to move on, to let it go so things could feel normal again. But normal didn't exist anymore. Not when I knew the truth. Not when I realized that my feelings had never really mattered to them in the first place. The isolation was suffocating. Family gatherings were tense, filled with forced small talk and smiles that didn't reach anyone's eyes. I felt like a stranger in my own home, like I was only welcome if I agreed to forget everything that had happened. At night, I lay awake, questioning if I had made the right choice. Was I being stubborn? Should I have just brushed it off? The doubt crept in, whispering that maybe I was the one tearing the family apart. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't the one who had broken things. I was just refusing to pretend they weren't broken. The conflict inside me grew stronger each day. I wanted to be close to my family, but I couldn't unhear what had been said. I couldn't ignore the way they had dismissed my pain. And I couldn't change the fact that, in their eyes, keeping peace was more important than standing up for what was right. I tried to hold on for as long as I could. I told myself that time would fix things, that maybe my family just needed space to understand where I was coming from. But the longer I waited, the clearer it became that nothing was going to change. Each time I spoke to my parents, the conversation felt forced. They avoided the topic altogether, pretending that if they didn't bring it up, it would go away. My brother never apologized, never acknowledged the damage he had caused. He carried on like everything was normal, like I was supposed to laugh along and forget the hurt he had inflicted. The final straw came during a family gathering. I had hesitated about going, but convinced myself that maybe things would feel different in person. Maybe they would finally understand how much this had affected me. But as soon as I walked in, I felt like I had made a mistake. My brother greeted me with a smirk, his voice full of the same arrogance he had always had. My parents acted like nothing had happened, making small talk and steering every discussion toward neutral topics. It was clear they had no intention of acknowledging the tension in the room. I sat there, feeling like an outsider in my own family, waiting for someone, anyone, to show that they cared about what I had been through. And then my brother made a passing comment, something small but sharp. He laughed about how sensitive I had become, rolling his eyes as if my emotions were nothing more than an inconvenience. My parents chuckled along, as if it was harmless, as if I was the one making things difficult by not moving on. That was it. That was the moment I realized I was done. I wasn't going to sit there and pretend to be okay. I wasn't going to keep swallowing my pain just to make them comfortable. Without saying a word, I got up and left. I could hear my mother call after me, but she didn't follow. None of them did. As I walked away, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was relief. I had spent so much time trying to fix something that was never going to be whole. I had been waiting for people to care, waiting for them to see my worth. But they never would, because they had never valued me enough to begin with. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to keep fighting for a place in a family that refused to respect me. I wasn't going to beg for love that came with conditions. Cutting my brother off wasn't just about what he had done, it was about everything my family had shown me in the aftermath. They had made their choice. Now I was making mine. Walking away from my family wasn't easy, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was choosing myself. There was no more waiting for apologies that would never come, no more hoping that my feelings would finally be taken seriously. I had spent years trying to keep the peace, but peace was never mine to begin with. It was built on silence, on letting things slide, on ignoring the hurt just to fit into a space that had never really welcomed me. Days turned into weeks, and the absence of my family became something I had to adjust to. There were moments where I felt the weight of it, when an old memory surfaced, when I thought about reaching out but stopped myself. The hardest part wasn't cutting off my brother, it was realizing how easily the rest of them let me go. No real effort was made to mend things, no acknowledgement of why I had stepped away. Their silence only confirmed what I had suspected all along. I was only valued when I stayed quiet. Instead of dwelling on what I had lost, I focused on what I had gained. I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore, waiting for the next insult to be brushed off as a joke. I no longer had to justify my hurt or prove why I deserved respect. Without the constant reminder that I wasn't enough in their eyes, I finally had the space to see my own worth. My fiancé stood by me through it all. His support never wavered, and for that I was grateful. He never told me what to do, never pushed me to forgive or forget. He simply reminded me that I deserved better, that love wasn't something I had to earn by sacrificing my dignity. I had spent so much time believing that family meant unconditional support, but I finally understood that respect had to go both ways. It wasn't my job to fix what they refused to acknowledge. If they could live without me, then I could learn to live without them. With each passing day, the weight on my chest grew lighter. The pain didn't disappear overnight, but it no longer controlled me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. And in that, I found freedom. This was my story, and in the end, I chose to prioritize my self-respect. For years, I put up with everything, hoping that maybe one day things would change. But they never did. In the end, I had to walk away, even if it meant distancing myself from my own family. But now, I want to ask you, did I do the right thing? Should I have cut ties with my brother and family, or should I have forgiven them? Does being family mean we have to tolerate everything, even when it costs us our dignity? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to distance yourself from people you once trusted? What would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. I really want to hear your thoughts.